Okay, the most common form of U.S. farm policy is that of price supports. Basically, the government comes in and says, we're going to set the price right here. No matter what, that's how much it sells for. As you recall, anytime that happens, we'll see a quantity demanded right here. We'll see a quantity supplied out here. It'll create a surplus. And that's what we've most often seen in our farming, is a market surplus. Now, how did they come up with this price right here? It comes from a term called parity. The idea behind it is to set farmers on an even keel with where they were before the first farm depression. The same living standard. As you recall, your grandparents have probably told you they could buy a candy bar for a nickel. Well, that's true. They could. What they failed to mention is they maybe made $5,000, $10,000 a year. Is that costs used to be a lot lower, but so were wages. So as prices and as we've seen inflation in prices, we've also seen the same in wages. And the idea of parity is just to put them on a level playing field with where the farmer was before that time. Well, that's a demand-side distortion. They're putting a price at the wrong spot. They also, the government will work on the supply side. They have something called an acreage set-aside. What this is when they pay a farmer not to use their land. The idea being that they'll cut supply because you won't be planting anything. But at the same time, they give you an incentive to preserve that land as farming land so that when it's needed, it's there. Otherwise, farmers might go out and put home developments, golf courses, mini malls, things of that nature on their land. In line with that is something called the Dairy Termination Program. If we look at the dairy industry, it all comes from a certain type of cattle, dairy cattle, that are very good at producing milk. What they are not good for is producing beef. The Dairy Termination Program is designed to slaughter dairy cows and feed them into the beef industry. Now, the idea behind that comes from what it takes to be a dairy farmer. To get a cow to produce milk, it has to have a calf. So what they're doing is constantly building the supply of dairy cattle by reproducing. Once they give it the reproduction, they then take the calf away, and that's where the cow produces the milk for. And they'll produce milk for a year and a half, and then they'll have to do it again. So because of that, there's an overpopulation of this dairy cattle. This is the idea, is that they'll cut the supply of dairy cattle, thereby cutting the supply of milk. And here's an area, as a side note, where you see tremendous technological advances. I don't know if you have ever milked a cow yourself, but if you've seen that picture on TV of that person milking the cow, to get a gallon of milk, you're talking about a half an hour to an hour's worth of work. Whereas nowadays, you can do 100 cows in a matter of minutes, getting more milk using a machine. So there's just an example of a technological advance. Okay, besides the Dairy Termination Program, which was an idea, all of these, to cut the supply. The next one is marketing orders. And this is where they actually allow collusion of the farmers to come together on an agreement of how much each one's going to produce. Anybody who produces over that amount is responsible for destroying their excess. That way it never gets to market. And fourth is to set quotas on what can come into the country. Typically, we do not import food that we produce here. Not during the season. We will in the off season.